I'm Tim McCosker. We'll start with roll call.
Councilmember McCosker,
Here.
Councilmember Rodriguez,
Here.
Councilmember Soto Martinez. Okay,
Okay, we have a quorum. We can get going. We'll start with public comment. It being a special meeting, there's no general public comment. There's five items on the agenda, up to 2 minutes for multiple items. No, up to, wait, what is it?
I'm sorry.
2 minutes?
2 minutes,
Yeah.
1 minute per item.
I think this is academic because I don't see the public speakers. Does anyone want to speak? Hearing none, we'll close public comment. Okay, what I'm going to recommend is that we, let's see here. I'm going to recommend of the 5 items that we just take item 3 on consent and hear the others. Is that okay with you, Claudia?
I actually have an amendment for item 3.
Okay, why don't you read it in?
Okay. My amendment is to instruct the LAFD to submit funding requests for the alternative fuel support vehicle and the additional tools and meters to the Los Angeles Fire Foundation.
I second that. That's great. And with that, why don't we call just the consent agenda, which will be to concur with the Public Safety Committee and note and file the LAFD report and instruct the department to include a prioritized list of new positions and equipment with that amendment.
Very good. Councilmember McCosker?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Aye.
Very good. That matter is approved as amended.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to recommend that we take item 2 first, and then we'll go to 1, 4, and 5.
Okay. Item 2 is continued from various dates in June, July, August, and September 2025. Follow-up reports from various departments relative to the citywide layoff management and related matters.
Thank you very much. So we have CIO and personnel here, and this is our continued item from week to week on the transfer portal and the layoff process, 2 parallel processes. And I know we have reports that because of the transfer portal, because of the cut and fill on site, and because of the agreements with our labor partners, that we've gotten the number down to functional 0 on the layoff process. But before we take a victory lap, it may be too late for that, but let's stop the victory lap. And I think it's important for us to focus on those folks that are sitting in substitute authorities and make sure that we continue this process of the transfer portal and the cut and fill and the alternatives so that we can keep track of all folks on sub-authorities and get those folks off of sub-authorities and on to continuing for the rest of the remainder of the fiscal year, continuing funded positions, and then we'll meet up with the budget proposal at the end of the year. That's just my uneducated, and I've got the smart people at the table here who can actually unpack that and kind of describe where we are. So why don't you go ahead?
You actually gave our presentation for us, council members, so thank you. We're done. No, Melissa Velasco with the CAO. Just very briefly, as you're aware, the 25-26 adopted budget reduced a significant number of positions in the city, and at the time the budget was adopted, we assumed the layoff of 614 people in the city. Because we needed to go through the layoff process, we issued substitute authorities for any of the positions that were still filled at the time of July 1st. And that number to date, as people have continued to transfer out of positions or to be moved within the department to other vacancies, has been reduced from that original 614 number to 300. So right now we have 300 people that are sitting in these substitute authority positions, which are positions that were created because their actual positions were eliminated in the budget. So as you indicated, we have reached some agreements with our labor partners, which means that we are currently holding these layoffs in abeyance. That doesn't mean that there will never be any layoffs. That means that we've come to an agreement where we will not be doing layoffs through the end of the current fiscal year. So it is still very important for those 300 positions, those 300 substitute authorities to be vacated so that we can excuse me, so that we do not have to look at a layoff process for those specific positions going into next fiscal year.
Personnel, please.
Malika Billups, Personnel Department. I'm here with Steve Rivera, who has some nuances and details about where we are with the expedited transfer portal. But broadly, as Ms. Velasco explained, we have the Personnel Department has been instructed to stop with the layoff process based on the labor agreements. And what we have done is we've stopped with the layoff calculations, and we have transitioned to focusing 100% on the expedited transfer portal to get those 300 people off of those substitute authority and move forward with getting them transferred and moved to positions that are funded. And so Steve has some details about that.
Thank you.
Before you move off that, just words matter. So the layoff process began because there was a budget document, and the budget document adopted by the council, signed by the mayor, had folks that were slated in that document for layoff. So you came up with a process. The general managers within their authority did cut and fill, and the transfer portal is something that the council approved. And then we reached agreement with our labor partners, and agreements are agreements. The agreements get implemented and are self-executing. And we got the number down to functional zero. You said you were instructed to stop the layoff process.
Yeah, and I should have said layoff calculations.
Okay, so as the management of the department, you can stop the calculations.
Yes.
But the process didn't require an instruction to stop. There was no one to lay off at that moment.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So there are moments, I realize, where we do government by press release, but that was an extra step. Thank you. That's not a question.
Yeah.
Morning, Councilmember Steve Rivera with the Personnel Department. First, give you some numbers regarding ETP, and just a little bit of history with ETP. We started this on May 20th of 2025 with the goal being to move individuals into special funded positions and then also general funded positions. To date, we have 161 CJOs. Of those, 104 have been accepted, 55 have been declined. Of the 104 that were accepted, 80 have been completed in Workday, and we expect the others to be completed in a couple of weeks. And we also have 2 CJOs that are pending decisions from the employees to determine if they're going to take the job or not. Overall numbers, we have a little over 1,700 applications that were submitted. And of those, 10,505 applications have been referred. Again, this is individuals whose applications have been referred more than once. So you can see here that the numbers have grown a lot over the last month or so. CJOs, although we started off slow, have continued to move at a faster pace than before. Those are the numbers right now. Like we said, our goal is to move. Right now we have 300 positions that are still identified for potential deletion. So our goal is to promote ETP. We have something that, although the name hasn't been coined yet, it seems like Roadshow may be something that kind of sticks with it. But our goal is to go and promote ETP and inform individuals what the negotiations or the agreed upon negotiations between labor and the city mean, and the fact that we still need to move people over to these special funded and general funded positions. We have a presentation that currently is in a draft, but we are expecting to have that ready in the next couple of weeks, and we will be scheduling with departments these presentations that we'd like to hold with these individuals and individuals in specific classifications within specific departments that we're facing layoffs. And that's going to be our strategy to continue to move people, keep the momentum going, and hopefully move as many people as possible so that we're not in the same position this time next year.
And on that note, I wanted to add that we have been working with our labor partners. Steve has been in touch with Leaders for Labor to participate and support that roadshow opportunity because they have a strong interest in getting their members to recognize the value of transferring in this position now that they've made agreements, sort of for the purpose of allowing these 300 folks to have the time to transition into a different position within the city in lieu of layoffs. And so there's a mutual interest that we have with labor. And so we've been collaborating with them to share the message about the opportunity to transfer.
So when you come back in a subsequent meeting, you can describe what the roadshow presentation will be like. And inartfully, I would think among its elements are what's at stake is that if we don't make these transfers, not just by the end of the year, but if we don't make these transfers soon and complete the transfers soon, the calculations will begin, no matter what, of how many days off without pay, how many furlough days people will get. And the goal shouldn't be to just have transfers by the end of the year so we save jobs. It's to have transfers and these reallocations or these transfers made soon enough so that we can calculate and have the calculation come out so that there is actually enough savings or enough fewer overages. It's not savings, it's fewer overages in that account that we set aside for the layoff process, so that if we can fit in that box all of the folks that are on sub-authorities, then there'll be fewer, maybe zero, but it may be as many as 5 furlough days for non-sworn workers.
Yeah, what you're saying makes, total sense. I think for us, the presentation is not just the information being shared, but the tone of the presentation as well.
Totally.
And so we want to make sure we strike the correct tone, in that although these negotiations were a good thing, there's still a lot of work to be done before, and the results if we're not able to move people. So yeah, we're really focused on the tone, like you mentioned.
Colleague?
Thank you. Well, forgive me, I won't be as artfully expressive in my comments this morning with trying to make this a more rosier procedurally what this looks like and what this actually is. Because what it is born on the back of cutting a number of city services, it's born on the back of a lot of concessions that were originally agreed to, and it's born on the back of retracting much of our city workforce. And so that being said, looking ahead at the new obligations that members of the council have saddled us to for the future, my question is, this is an exercise that is going to, I think, be a dress rehearsal for the next fiscal year. And that being said, has there been some outlook with the CAO's office since the mayor's proposed budgets have continued to eliminate a lot of the flexibility that departments originally had, with absorbing position cuts that came as a result of vacancies, unfilled vacancies, and allowing them the flexibility to do that? That's practically been zeroed out, if I'm not mistaken. Is that accurate?
So we're actually working on that exercise right now, sort of in conjunction with the first financial status report, which we anticipate will be released later this month. So it is obviously a concern. A lot of departments right now in our sort of preliminary estimates and working with them, understandably, because of the situation, are running salary deficits with their existing staff. So obviously some of that may be addressed with some of these unpaid days we were discussing that would reduce expenditures. But at this point in time, I think we do have a little bit of a concern that the city's financial picture, given a number of items.
You're very generous
forward,
with a little bit of a concern, but okay.
So at this point in time, it's a little too early for us. It's definitely too early for us to predict, next fiscal year, which I think is going to obviously be a very significant conversation with some of the ongoing obligations that the city has. But even right now, it's a little early for us to predict this fiscal year. So we're trying to collate all of that data as far as each of the individual departments' current outlooks, as far as their expenditure projections for salaries and everything else. And that sort of initial projection is what we'll be providing in the first FSR later this month.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I know some of the previous instructions that I've given in terms of the reconciliation of people's years of service, and how's that coming along?
I would say we're still in that process. What I explained previously is that we focused on the people and
Right,
the
that were
specific
first triggered,
classes.
right.
But that work is ongoing. I don't know if I have updated numbers on where we are, but it's an ongoing process. We're working with our department personnel officers are working with the departments themselves and the individuals to make sure we're within that data collection and update method. We're also in conversations with Workday about like how can we facilitate opportunities to make, you know, all of this easier. So it's not just, and maybe, I don't know if we'll hear about some of that a little bit later on today, but it's not just, you know, us trying to do manual calculations. You know, part of the relationship with Workday is facilitating all of these things so that it's, you know, it's easier. So I've been in discussions with Workday about those
Yeah.
opportunities too.
It's just been languishing, and this is where, you know, and I've said this previously, you got to have a drop dead date. I know you have a number of competing priorities, but this seems like the simplest one for people to knock out. So, because when you, sadly, I hope to be wrong, but when we're going through this exercise, again, given the fiscal outlook and the constraints based on the federal government, based on a whole lot of factors, we don't need to, I mean, let's not fool ourselves here. Let's be adults in the room having real conversations. I'd like that to get done so that so that's the least, you're not paying attention to that. That's just done and handled already. Those are things that continue to just hang over everybody's head. The sooner you knock it out, the sooner you can move on to all the other issues that we're going to be dealing with. But, okay, thank you.
Thank you. I don't have further questions, but colleague, I'm going to move that we continue the item, meaning holding it in the committee, including holding the CIO report dated September 30th, 2025 in this committee with a return on the calculation of sub-authority positions by department and plans by the CIO and Personnel Department on the continuing ETP process. So we want to see them just like we did with the, well, that's it. That's the motion. That's what we want to see come back on a regular basis. With that, do we need to call roll? No. Oh, thank you. That'll be the order then. Thank you so much. We'll move to item 1 then, if you could read that into the record.
Item 1, CLA report relative to the creation of workplace violence and protection plans pursuant to Senate Bill 553.
Thank you. Do we have a report from personnel on this?
Actually, it's a CLA report, so I'll give a brief overview and
good.
then turn it
Thank
over to personnel. This is Dr. Laura Kokinda from the Personnel Department. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to present on our report. I'm Maria Souza Roundtree from the CLA's office. Our report was prepared in consultation with the department because the measures and protocols to protect our employees is under their purview. I would like to take an opportunity to thank Valentina Deba in our office who prepared the report. I'm just here publicly presenting and taking all the credit for it. So thanks to her for her work. I'll do a quick summary of the report and then turn it over to the department. As a background, this report was prepared in response to a motion introduced last year that noted the passage of SB 553 in September 2023 that required California employers to create a workplace violence prevention plan by July 1st of 2024. It also expanded the use of restraining orders to protect employees, which is important. The city was already doing a lot related to workplace violence protection, and we have a workplace violence policy that was first established in 1997, and it's been updated over the years. In general, the city's met the July 1st, 2024 deadline, but we're still waiting for rulemaking to meet the December 2026 deadline. The report includes communication from the Personnel Department in Attachment B that summarizes their work with the city attorney, all of which are necessary to comply with SB 553. And we also have Attachment C, which is the table detailing the status of compliance for all of the provisions in the legislation. Pages 3 and 4 of the report highlight 6 major updates that will require additional compliance efforts, and page 4 and 5 include the status updates on the workplace violence prevention plans, employee training, hazard assessment, violence incident logs, and the violence reporting for the employees. So that's the general overview, and if we can turn it over to Dr. Kokinda to go into more detail on the data.
Thank you, Doctor.
Yes, so in general, the city was way ahead of what's being asked. Unfortunately, the 1997 Department of CPAC.
I apologize. We can all hear you well, but just for the recording, if you could speak into the mic. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so in general, the city was way ahead of what's being asked. Unfortunately, in 1997, there was an incident of workplace violence, which is why we were ahead. But in response to that incident, citywide threat assessment team was developed, and CTAT consists of various threat team members, including LAPD's TMU, LAPD's security services, psychologists from medical services division who specialize in targeted violence and workplace violence prevention, the city attorney, and other personnel members. So what has happened historically was each department has a workplace violence coordinator who receives reports of potential workplace violence or workplace violence incidents that is investigated and managed that way, and then also referred to CTAT when further specialized review is required. At this time, SB 553 just changed the way we track that data and exactly how it's written out. So it's a little bit more on the logistics side than actually changing how we're managing, but it gave some structure to how we're tracking the data. It gave additional structure into how we're training employees, which is what we are in progress. We are preparing an all-city training that will be available on Cornerstone and be required. So this training will provide every city employee with some context for workplace violence and what that includes. And it will also, with the release of this training, provide a link for any city employee to directly report a concern regarding workplace violence to CTAT, which they'll have an anonymous reporting option, which will be in response to SB 553's requirements to have the ability to report without fear of retaliation.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, sometimes the incidents might involve a supervisor, someone in the department, so employees may not want to speak up and report through the chain to the workplace violence coordinator. So with the release of this training coming by the end of this year, then we will be in line with what we're being asked to do on that end. But overall, it's a very extensive program and one of the industry leaders in the nation, actually.
So essentially, we've submitted, we were ahead of the curve. We've submitted, we're waiting for a determination as to whether or not within the confines of the statutory mechanism, we've been approved. And then I didn't understand the comment about the rulemaking. So is there going to be a state agency establishing a rule on the ongoing compliance?
So that is written into the bill. So we have to self-monitor at this time, which we are in part setting up a team who can do that. It's a lot of additional logistics, but we are on top of it.
In this, did we take this opportunity to update the types and the number and the responses, the circumstances of threats? Because it has changed a lot since '97.
Yes. There's 4 types of workplace violence that need to be tracked in detail on violent incident logs that each department is maintaining through their coordinator. And then that will allow us to also compile all city data and see what the trends are and how it's evolved and where our energies need to be focused to be most effective.
Colleague?
Thank you, colleague. So in the report, if I understand correctly, it says that there's individual reports that have to be done at various work sites. It's not like a standardized.
Correct. Each department has a workplace violence prevention plan. So that each report is supposed to identify department-specific challenges. Each department is in a workforce as large as the cities. There's a lot of
variation, but there are also, I always get worried about this. It's kind of like personnel can understand this. It's a lot like Workday. Everyone has specialized rules. What I do in my department is so different and unique compared to everyone else, but then that makes it very hard to manage because everyone is doing something differently. Are there opportunities to standardize some of the procedurally, how things are done so that you don't have, 50 different ways of trying to track and manage, because frankly, that's also potentially a liability risk. So what is the grade, and I know they're currently under review, correct?
Mhm.
By the city attorney, is that right?
Yes, we have them. We've reviewed them actually at
Okay.
this time. Yes.
So I just flag it for the sake of, there's kind of some baseline understandings that we should have that should be standardized, because if we're chasing all of the nuances of how everyone, again, everyone's special, I know, everyone is special. But I just want to make sure that we're not opening ourselves up for potential liability risk if everyone's doing something different and we don't have standardized, somewhat, for lack of a better word, boilerplate procedures that are consistent throughout all of the different plans. Only because I think if absent that, then you have no consistency to really track and manage.
So I can speak to that. The workplace violence prevention plan comes from a template provided by the city attorney's office that standardizes 90
Some
percent.
baseline.
Yes.
Got it.
And then each department has an addendum page where they went through and added department specific challenges that they have identified, which is a requirement of the plan, that they have to look at what's unique here versus any employer to track how we're improving potential weaknesses in this area. But the vast majority of the plan is the standard procedure provided by the city attorney's office. So.
Okay. And just because, obviously, as the preceding conversation is about transfers and whatnot. And so my concern is that if someone is in one department and they are accustomed to whatever their circumstances is, if they get transferred, are they now going to have to become familiar with what the new procedural changes are going to be that could be substantially different, but when we're still acting as one city?
Correct. Which the all city workplace violence training that we're about to release will also capture this because
Okay.
it's going to be standard for all. Everyone will have that same reporting link. So if you transfer from one work location or department to another, it's the same process for
Okay.
everyone. So
Yeah. Just, again, just to the greatest extent possible to standardize it so that we're all kind of operating from the same playbook makes life a lot easier.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to your colleague for the report. Thank you, Doctor. I'm going to move that we approve the report's recommendation. Note and file the CLA report and instruct the Personnel Department to report back in 180 days on the city's workplace violence protection plan and the implementation status of the workplace violence reporting link. Please call the roll.
Councilmember McOsker?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Aye.
That is approved as described.
All right. Thank you very much. Item 4, can you read that into the record?
Item 4 is continued from September 12, 2025. Motion, McOsker Hernandez, relative to the implementation of Workday.
Great. Thank you very much. I think we have ITA, LAFD, LAPD controller personnel and Workday here. I don't know if we have Workday here. Do we have? We do. Okay. Thank you. So why don't we come up to the table? I think we have to, let's do an overview of where we are with Workday implementation, but then let's also focus on particular issues at LAFD and LAPD. And on the LAPD issues, it is also a big part of making sure that we can meet our obligations on the labor agreements, and it impacts the first item that we took up, item number 2, and whether or not we're going to be able to meet our obligations and get the benefit of the bargain of the labor agreement between management and in this case, PPL. So why don't we do a general Workday overview?
Sure. Good morning, Ed Magos with the Information Technology Agency. I'll provide an update initially on the status of the implementation of the voluntary overtime bank, and as it relates to that, the 171 rule with LAPD sworn.
Okay, so we're going to start with LAPD.
Correct.
Okay, go.
So the last time we were in committee, we talked about the issues related to implementing the voluntary overtime bank. There was some logic and concerns around how a 28-day deployment and how overtime was being handled with the 171 rule, specific again to the police sworn deployments. Since that time, we have now investigated the code and the logic that was deployed in Workday. Some recommendations have been made by Workday. I will say at a high level, a path forward has been identified, and we're at a place now where we are testing with controller, with ITA, with Workday and LAPD to test this, and there's a kind of a set of recommendations to move forward, but we believe there is a path now to resolve 171. And the other piece, I'll pass it over to Workday for the specifics on that, but the other piece that has been going on in parallel, again, with our city teams, controller, personnel, and ITA, is that the voluntary overtime bank work and configurations in Workday, those pieces have all been completed in a non-production environment. They're also ready for testing. So the remaining tasks, we had a long list of tasks, about 50 different items. We're down to less than a dozen, and they're all in the areas of completing training, some additional user testing, because there are some processes we want to make sure LAPD is tested and their teams are ready. And then there's some communications that are being prepared in partnership with the CAO so that everyone's clear about what the VOB rollout will look like. So that's what's remaining now is testing, training, and communication.
Before Workday goes, does that mean that we've had the agreement between PPL and the City of Los Angeles for the voluntary bank for now several weeks, and we haven't put a single hour into it?
That's my understanding.
Okay, I'm going to need the CAO to tell us what our expectations are for the remainder of the fiscal year as to how much savings. I realize it's not really savings; it's avoidance of costs, and
So
what's going to be our sort of our burn rate or our accumulation rate to get there by the end of the fiscal year.
yeah, I just wanted to confirm it, Paul from CAO. I just wanted to make sure that we are correct. So my understanding, again, with IT on the technical side, is that the resolution of the 171 calculations was it required to be
Yes.
fixed before the voluntary overtime bank program could begin.
Yes.
So now that those pieces are in place, we're setting the stage now again for validating that we can run it. That's the testing piece, then the training and communication.
Chief, we're going to get to you in just a minute. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to see if controller or and whether police management want to speak on this. But controller, thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having us. So as Ed from ITA stated, from our perspective as the controller's office, we know that Workday pretty much has the configurations, and our office has already created the codes needed. What we're currently on when it comes to when it's saying it needs to be tested is we're waiting on now the department to actually do the testing of that. And then once it's done, it will then come back to my office. We'll then basically effectuate the changes. So that's where we're at in terms of when we say testing.
So is there from your seat, from your position as the guy that presses the button to pay people, is there logic to what we've just heard, that we have to configure the 171 fix, and then we have to test it, and then we implement it?
Yes, from our understanding, we need to get the 171 rule fixed first.
Because we're doing that, that's applicable whether we have this labor agreement or not.
Right, and that is part of a longer list of 250 open payroll items. But we could talk about systemic issues as a whole later. But we need 171 rule to be fixed, because that affects the VOB. And so once 171 is fixed, then we can fix the VOB. But right now, where it's at is the testing needs to be finished by payroll and LAPD.
Does that mean that we have not seen a quantitative or qualitative difference in how the 171 is being implemented and how cops are getting paid now? In other words, we know we see a future to fix this problem, but are we still having payroll mistakes every 2 weeks? On the 171 issue, on the overtime issue.
So again, I can't speak for LAPD. I'm aware of some metrics. Broadly, the 171 calculations work for a majority of people.
Yeah.
What is being fixed and addressed right now are some edge cases that do impact people each payroll. It can be very few people. It can be zero. It really depends if those certain conditions are met. There was, again, one of the things Workday discovered is there's a missing pay component that, again, only impacts under certain conditions for certain people over a 28 deployment. That correction has been put in place in a test environment for testing. We believe that will address the open 171 tickets or issues that have been reported.
Yes,
So it has been running this whole time and has been working for many people, but there are, again, real issues that impact certain conditions. And when those conditions are met, it will overdraw from certain banks. And I think at a very high level, that's ultimately because with our sworn, their time is coming in from outside systems that are not well integrated to Workday. The recommendation, I think, has always been, and we're in that process, right, of
Right.
bringing sworn into a proper timekeeping system. Until then, time and numbers are coming into Workday rather blind, and if the balances are not there, there are certain conditions that can hit that will require a correction.
So by that, you're saying that DPS creates some communication challenges with Workday? Is that what you're
The
saying?
fact that they are not kind of a common system that has complete knowledge back, both ways around the banks, the time banks for employees. And it's a similar to situation with
NSS.
fire. Yes.
Say NSS and fire, and
Yes.
this is DPS
Yes.
and police.
Yes, and hence the work really to bring our sworn into a kind of consolidated timekeeping system where everything, all the data is shared, all the logic can be applied.
Yeah.
That type of thing.
I want to make sure that the elected city controller has a chance to speak, but we do want to hear from Workday.
Just to touch on your question, yes, there are certain employees who are still getting paid out instead of getting those hours banked. So, but he said that basically it's getting
Yeah.
drawn.
Workday.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide an update. Lisa Coulter with Workday, an update on a couple of the key issues that Workday has been supporting. Ed commented on it briefly. Separating them out, the one issue is the overtime bank balance is going into a negative. That is an extremely manual process right now that we put in place, knowing temporarily we would be moving to a time tracking solution at some point. The manual solution is takes a lot of work and it actually is prone to more errors occurring. So we have identified a solution to actually take those overtime hours and borrow from the old plan. I think it's plan 1.5 or something. Borrow from those and then replenish the bank so that we're not ending up in that scenario. That needs to be approved and green lighted for us to put in place. It would take Workday about 5 hours to implement that change, and then the testing effort on the city.
Needs to be approved by whom?
I think it's with police and maybe the CAO and personnel, just to approve that would be not breaking any policies to borrow from an old plan and replenish the new plan.
Is that a city attorney issue? Is that a bargaining issue? What is that? Is there somebody that can approve that? This is one of those things in the vacuumocracy, which is the city of Los Angeles. Who is responsible for saying yes to Workday so we can spend 5 hours and try to solve this problem? Not a rhetorical question. Who approves that? The chief? Trina, do you know?
Open. Trina Unziker, CFO of LAPD. So from the department's perspective, we're all on board with an automated solution.
Yeah.
What we want to ensure that we've done is that we've communicated to officers that anyone with a negative balance, or if there's a balance that needs to occur where we need to move from one bank to another, that we inform them of that prior to having that happen. So we believe that that solution is part of a discussion with the HRP team, probably most specifically the CAO ERD. But we just want to make sure that officers are aware of this possibility prior to that automation occurring.
So by talking to officers, we talk to their bargaining representatives. That means speaking to the Police Protective League.
Yes, that would be
Working
an
out the
effective way
issue.
to do it. Yes.
Okay. And that would be advisable as quickly as possible. So we're talking about, before we get off of police, I'm sorry, colleague, we're going to go to, I'm going to recommend we go to fire next, but do you have questions for police? Okay, so where are we? What are the next steps on the 171 and on resolving police pay issues in Workday? And I'm going to want to know whether DPS is something that we have to take a look at and maybe do a bake-off like we're doing in fire.
Right. So just real quickly on the second issue that Ed mentioned was the missing pay component. That just needs to get put into your production environment at this point. The controller's office is responsible for that.
What does production environment mean?
So you have a test environment that you can configure and test and validate, and then it gets moved into production.
Okay.
The city owns production configuration, so Workday can guide with that effort. That piece is what's concerning about what you're talking about with DPS replacement is moving to a time tracking system that actually integrates more effectively with Workday, or frankly, Workday time tracking itself. Would eliminate a number of these manual processes that we have in place for auditing and validating and catching errors before pay is issued. It also would help with some of these things that come up. So my concern is any other thing that comes through from bargaining or otherwise is going to always require Workday to come back and help at this point. So
Does the controller or the CIO or management in police feel that we need to replace or modify DPS to make it more communicative with Workday? Or does Workday need to be more receptive to DPS?
So I'll speak to that based on the advice that we've gotten from ITA. And that is that DPS, I believe, is a 30-year-old system. So there have been discussions about replacing it prior to Workday going live. There are continued discussions about that. And I believe it's been ITA in particular, and the opinion of the HRP team, that some of the issues that we're experiencing, there would be fewer of them. And so in the same way that there's a discussion about replacing NSS with another product, it would be a similar discussion with DPS.
Okay, well, the discussions, and this is not directed at you, but the discussions need to end, and we need to get to the part where we do something. I mean, because it's only going to get more expensive. Sounds like a debate we had a couple weeks ago. It's only going to get more expensive, and it's sort of non-negotiable that we have a tracking system for our employees, and it's non-negotiable that we have a tracking system accurate enough or capable of telling Workday how to pay and how the controller, when he presses the button for paychecks to go out, they have to be right. So what's the plan?
So I'll mention on the ITA side, we have been inviting LAPD to sit in on the demonstrations that LAFD is doing with regard to their bake-off. What's becoming clear to, I think, many people is that HR and payroll are obviously so tightly connected. If you have certain certifications, if you have certain bonus things, those are tied to your HR role and might be part of your personnel profile. Then if you do certain types of work under certain type of work orders or certain types of locations, it impacts. So these things need to be shared real time, very tightly. If we don't have access to that data, to those calculations, to all the business processes that represent the MOUs, things can get out of line. And so that's why it's becoming more and more urgent that our sworn get brought into the same system that has all of that logic, has all of those rules, has that information. So we are moving with LAPD to start set up a timeline around that replacement. Obviously, there are funding requirements. There's analysis that needs to be done. These are big projects, as we've mentioned before. But that process is moving. It's in play. Again.
Okay, but this can't be you can't get there from here sort of directions. Is LAPD committed to sit down with our labor partner and resolve this 5-hour issue that Workday has, where we will talk about borrowing and a real negotiation? I mean, they need to understand what we're talking about.
100%.
Okay, great. And then can management sit with ITA and replicate the process we're going through on fire to look at the deployment system and do what they have called a bake-off to see whether or not there are tweaks to it or whether there's a new product that we need to have?
Yes, I've actually attended a panel discussion, and
Thank you.
And so we are prepared to have those discussions. Just for clarity, I also believe that Ms. Coulter mentioned the issue of time tracking as well. So that would be a separate issue. So we would be looking at a DPS replacement. In addition to that, we have time tracking for our civilian employees. Time tracking would require licensure of 8,000 plus officers. So that would be a separate issue as well that we should discuss in conjunction with an overall review of how LAPD's system is responding to Workday.
And can you commit that we will have labor at the table, not as the decision maker, I get it, but in the process so they understand exactly how to communicate with their members, how we're resolving this problem?
We're happy to. They've been excellent partners so far in helping us move forward on VOB and the 171-hour rule.
Great. Mr. Controller, is there something I'm missing here?
No, I just said, in terms of the immediate, we need testing to be done by PD before we can come in and basically do our side of things.
Yeah.
I would just say on a high level perspective, this is what we saw with Fire, right? Their system doesn't work with Workday.
Yeah.
So then we need to do manual fixes, which requires Fire to do the manual testing, which takes a long time because it's a lot of employees. And then once it's configured on Workday and then they're good with the testing, then they give it to us and then we upload and then we push the button to pay. Where we're at is we're at that testing phase now where PD is, I believe you guys are short staffed still to do all the testing that's needed to handle all these transactions. And so I think what you'll see is a similar recommendation or solution is either, more staffing and also a better software or system that works better with Workday. So it's sort of a repeat. But I think overall, though, this goes to the fact that I think Councilmember Rodriguez said 2 weeks ago, the city, we defer things, and we don't invest. And so I think when it comes to accounting or payroll or technology, we need to really invest in that, or else we'll just be here again in 4 months for the next issue that pops up. So those are my closing remarks.
Thank you. Colleague, any questions before we move to Fire?
No, it's just a reminder, again, when we embark upon this, and this even kind of dovetails a little bit to the preceding conversation that we had. While I know everyone is special and does things in a unique way, we're going to pay one way or another. We're either going to pay with personnel staffing to manually make corrections, or we're going to make investments in technology across the board, which will require adaptation for our city employees to modernize with the rest of the city and the rest of the world to be able to input their time a little bit differently so that we can ensure their payroll is accurate. So I say this to everybody that's listening in the universe, from our labor partners to our city employees and to my colleagues when they're going through the budgetary process and denying these types of investments. The reality is that we're going to pay one way or another, either with employees that are pissed off because they're not getting paid accurately or they're getting delayed. So let's just do it right the first time. Measure twice, cut once. And let's make the investments that we need to do to modernize everything. And Trina, I appreciate, you guys were stuck holding the bag on all of this, just as Fire was, just for merely being under-resourced and not being given the tools that you needed to begin with. So as I know we're going to be more constrained as we go forward, I just, for the next juncture of modernization conversations, and look, and it's not without ITA trying. This is where I'm constantly coming to the defense of ITA and TED, and because you guys have said it, even though it's fallen on, it's been not received from the leaders of the city who have the opportunity to make the decisions right the first time. So let's stop making a mess of things and let's just do it right the first time. But I want to thank you all for helping to correct the unforced errors, unfortunately, of decisions that were made. Thank you.
Thank you, Trina. Appreciate you coming up. And maybe that'll be the spot we ask the fire. Oh, you wanted to speak. I'm sorry. I interrupted.
Oh, no. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity.
Thanks. I appreciate your time. And let's, Fire, why don't we turn to Fire? If you wouldn't mind coming up. Maybe you come up to the podium. We'll let the controller stay right where he's at. If we could get kind of an update of where we are with Fire, because, we've been talking at many of these meetings about what we call the bake-off and the NSS system and how it's going to communicate, and fire has its own very complicated set of deployment rules and payments. Where are we?
Yeah, I'm happy for Fire to provide the update. They've
Good.
been doing a great job kind of taking point on this bake-off.
Good, thank you. Yes,
Good
sir.
morning, Orrin Saunders, Assistant Chief, Information Technology Bureau. We've had our initial bake-off presentations with both Workday and UKG. We've given them both the scope of work, about 40 different scenarios, and gone through a lot of complex scenarios with both companies. We have some follow-up presentations needed with both. That's going to be scheduled within the next month, so then we can delineate each of the responsibilities of those scenarios, whether they'll be enhanced procedures that will be updated in Workday, or whether that would go with UKG for some others, and delineate which systems will reside in which, and the NSS piece, and then other scenarios outside of the NSS piece that will make some of the integration a little bit smoother, both on the HR portion as well as some of the payroll functions within Workday.
Good. I would ask the controller to kind of give a, if you can, just give an overview of where you think we are with this, because I know that these failures come back to you. I mean, failures of the system come back to all the manual work. Where do you think we are?
We're used to it. Yeah, they're going through the bake-off as said, but once that's done, it's going to require basically configurations and our team, which we need support and controller support. We actually need more staffing, because once this is implemented and we get a new system working, we need to dedicate folks to just this fire related, because it's entirely new system. So once they're done with that, that's where we would come in. But my ask is we would need some support to help them get through there.
And this was the crisis months ago that we looked at. It was actually, we identified this way too late, but much earlier than the 171 issue at police. And we did put some additional resources in. Has that come and gone?
Yeah, so fire, I think you guys got some additional resources that we pushed for. They also got the software funding, I believe, some of it.
We did.
Yeah, they got, so what we asked for is they're putting it into motion.
So Chief, those positions got filled.
Yes, all positions are filled at this
And those are needed positions off into the future. Those need to be permanent authorities, correct?
Yes, they do.
Yeah, that's it. And maybe more.
That was definitely a start.
Yeah, good, thank you. Workday, you have thoughts on this?
No, I mean, I have some general thoughts that I would want to share. We've talked about, I've heard it on many of these meetings about, when the decision was made to not go to Workday, time tracking, or others, we focused on integration work and manual workarounds, which is becoming obvious that it's a burden on the city of what that was. So it needs to be addressed. I just lost my train of thought.
There was a decision made that it wouldn't all go into Workday. We were going to keep NSS.
Right. So panning out and looking at what those requirements actually are, I'm trying to get away from the tunnel vision of duct taping this thing together every time something comes up, when we know that the solution is a time tracking system that either speaks to Workday or is Workday. Tons of time will be saved. Obviously, accuracies will be there, and we won't be battling the two systems.
Chief, do you have a sense of of how the bake-off's coming out? I mean, are we going to be looking at a new system? I know that one of your non-sworn colleague had identified a new system, or do you think we're going to be reworking NSS?
We definitely know NSS is definitely going to need to be replaced, so that's definitely going to happen.
Okay, so it's just a matter of which system is the right one.
Correct, in certain scenarios. So we'll know that some may work better in Workday, and then others will be maybe more exclusive on the UKG side.
And going to the question that I had for police, how are we working with our labor partners? How is UFLAC being consulted with? Are we bringing them along through the process, because these are their members who either get paid accurately or not?
Yeah, we've definitely been updating as far as what's happening with the process, and we'll continue to do so as we move further. Once this bake-off delivers some additional information, we'll be able to present that to them on a more focused approach.
It's probably outside of our lane here, but I would urge, I know my colleague would agree, urge more transparency. Be at the table so they can see everything coming. It's going to be better It's going to be better for all of us so that everyone can be advised as to what the system looks like soon when we have it fixed.
Most definitely, the collective approach definitely works, and we'll bring them along the way the entire time.
Colleague, other questions? Very helpful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there other issues for us to look at within Workday? These are the two big meaty ones. What's happening with non-sworn? I mean, I know we have the big issue that my colleague raises accurately, that we have to have accurate information for what is ultimately going to be a layoff process, hopefully in the more distant future, but maybe in the pretty immediate future.
I can speak for, again, from ITA's perspective, we do run the weekly change management meetings across the HRP platform with participation of all the departments. And I can tell you on the ground, the teams are stretched thin.
Yeah.
The teams are jumping from one kind of critical, area. And it's why, each time we come here, we say, in all earnesty and humility, these are top priorities for us, and we are putting everything at it. And as we do, there's something else, right, that's starting to simmer. The controller said it well. ITA is in similar situation, and so we're doing the best we can to identify quickly the top critical items, but there are many. As I shared 2 weeks ago, we receive between 750 to 800 or 900 tickets a month across all of our teams, and the teams are able to keep up with that quantity, sometimes even closing an extra 100. But our backlog today is still roughly 1,370, I believe I looked this morning. We are putting in our budget for personnel controller and ITA additional consultants to clear the backlog. We need to, because within that backlog, there are other items that can impact. And some of them are reports and things that are just quality, they're nice to have. They're going to help speed things up. There's a lot of tuning that we need to do. We know this, and we've talked about Pacer had a decade of continuous development, and we're committed to another decade of continuous development across all our teams. I can tell you that on ITA, in controller and personnel, our city staff are learning the platform. They're getting certifications. They are taking their trainings. They're getting really great. We're building capacity within the city to really own and run this product and this tool. But it is taking time, and with all of these things, it's slower than we would like. And so ITA will be putting in a budget some additional requests on behalf of the project to help fast track some of these areas. And that's above and beyond the sworn projects. Those are big projects as well to bring sworn into timekeeping.
Okay.
And I would just say from the controller's perspective, so we have about 250 open payroll tickets. Our payroll group gets over 1,000 emails and calls a month. And we also have close to 50 items on a wish list to make things better. So like when these issues pop up, whether it's fire or it's PD, basically that jumps to the top of the 250. So we really don't address a lot of these issues. And I believe it's two ways that we need to tackle this. It's software related, and it's also staffing related. A lot of these departments that handle these are very short staff. Our staffing is at 65% in my payroll team, where we need to be. And so I think if we're really gonna try to truly address this, I don't think we should wait until the budget process. I don't think we should wait until an FSR. I think we need a break from the CAO and the way the city recommends on how we budget and we fill, these solutions in a much faster way. And you guys are the final bosses, and just say, hey, if ITA needs 10 more staff, let's give them it now. If controller needs 10 more payroll, let's give it now. If they need 1.5 million for fire, let's just do it. And we could help with the funding recommendations, but I think that's, as Councilmember Rodriguez said, we can't just keep waiting till the next process to happen, because this is going to come up again, and we will be here because one of those 250 items is going to boil up and it's going to get to the top, whether it's through a grievance by labor, a lawsuit, or just employees complaining. We need to tackle this systemically and just invest up front. And it's not really a lot out of a $14 billion budget. It could be like 3 million, 4 million, but that's literally all we're asking for to really address these compounding problems.
Well, I will say make the proposals, and thank you for the offer, looking for funding, solutions as well. Make the offer, because we can talk about it, and we can also do something.
I'll do something similar to like we did for fire.
Yeah.
I'll work with PD and ITA and
That was an excellent recommendation, and the backlog in fire did come down. And it's coming down rapidly. It's still too big. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, I'm going to move that we continue and hold this matter in the committee and request another update by our next Personnel and Hiring Committee meeting. Do we need to vote on that if I hold it?
No vote required.
Thank you very much, everyone. Can you read item 5 into the record?
Item 5, Personnel Department report relative to the sworn hiring in the Los Angeles Police Department.
Thank you so much. We're joined by personnel. I know we have LAPD here as well. So why don't you give us, thank you. Why don't you give us an overview of the report and where we're at? And this is something we're going to keep tracking.
Yeah. Good morning, Michael Rose from the Personnel Department.
You can pull that right towards you so you don't have to lean forward.
Yeah.
Make yourself comfortable.
Yeah, and we'll be giving an update on the public hiring metrics dashboard that's used to track the pipeline and the timeline to hire police officer candidates for LAPD. And we're going to do it before I pull up the dashboard to demonstrate how recent changes to the selection process have had positive impacts on the timeline to hire, as well as our ability to effectively or efficiently use available resources to process candidates through the process. So I'm going to pull up the dashboard. And this first screen that we're looking at is the first step in the selection process. This is the reading and writing assessment, which candidates prior to the change on July 1st of this fiscal year could take either in person or online. And on July 1st of this fiscal year, that move was made to make the default option online testing. This reduces the time to process candidate scores, and it also gives candidates the option to take the test anytime, anywhere. If there are circumstances where candidates don't have the equipment or the space to take it online, they do have the option to submit a hardship request for on-site testing. But this first tab shows the time to hire for candidates who took the test from July 1st, 2024 to October 3rd of 2024. And this date range is an updated date range from the one that was included in the report. And the reason we chose this date range is because it's 1 year ago from the equivalent timeline this year when we made the changes from July 1st to today. So I'm going to direct the attention up to this top center box. This shows the time to process results. So it's the average and the median number of days from the date the test was administered to the date that the candidate received the results, and if they pass, would be able to move on to the next step. So when we had both in-person and online tests, the average time was 3 days, and the median was 2. And I'm going to switch now to the timeline for the current year. The average and the median have gone down to 1. So it is only a reduction of 1 or 2 days, but these reductions add up throughout the selection process, as you'll see. So the next tab I'm going to show, this is going to show the timeline from the interview to the medical evaluation. And the primary change that impacted, or the primary changes that would impact the timeline here were on July 11th when we removed the self-scheduling option. So prior to July 11th, and interested in being candidate friendly, we would let candidates schedule their own appointments. So based on their availability, they could select an appointment. But we noticed in practicality, candidates would pace themselves and not necessarily schedule themselves for the next available appointment. They would take times, sometimes months or years to move forward. In addition, we didn't used to enforce our personnel policies regarding cancellations and no-shows. So if candidates schedule themselves for an appointment and didn't appear, there was no consequence, and they could do that for multiple appointments. And that would take slots away from candidates who might be more motivated and more qualified. So with that in mind, I'm going to direct the attention to this center box. This is showing the time from their interview, the date that they passed their interview, to the date that they had their medical evaluation. So for the period of July 11th, 2024 to October 3rd, 2024, the average days were 47 and the median were 36. If we go to the equivalent time period for this calendar year, you'll see the average is 33, the median is 20.
Okay.
So the average is still higher than the median. The reason for that is because we did let candidates who were legacy, so who had their interview prior to July 11th, were still allowed to be scheduled for a medical appointment. So to get a more accurate number, we also pulled the last 2 weeks. And if we look at the last 2 weeks, so September 19th, 2025 to present, that number goes down to an average of 18 days and a median of 13. So it's about a third of the processing time from last year. And this is a more accurate idea of what we would anticipate the timeline being going forward now that we have those legacy candidates cleared out of the system. Okay. And then the next step I'm going to show is the timeline from interview to polygraph. And when we're showing this, one thing to keep in mind is oftentimes the medical happens between these two stages. But there are certain circumstances, if we have sufficient poly slots, the candidates can have their polygraph before their medical. So when we look at 2024, from July 11th to October 3rd.
Sorry to interrupt you, but so these have they always run in parallel, or are they seriatim?
They get switched. It depends on our resources. So sometimes we'll have more medical slots and sometimes we'll have more polygraph slots.
I get that, but have we always been able to proceed on medical and proceed on poly on parallel tracks? Or was there a time when we had to get through the poly and then do medical, get through the medical and then go through poly?
Yeah, years ago, it used to be that poly was actually taken before medical at all times, but because of changes in available slots, we had some increases in medical slots. It's now medical before poly typically, yeah.
But you can sign up for both at the same time and move forward.
You can be assigned for a polygraph appointment before your medical if one is available. Currently, we don't hold people up, basically.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no problem. So looking at the 2024 timelines, we see that the average between interview to polygraph was 55 days, and the median was 39. Again, even back then, they would have medical between those two steps, but that's the timeline from last year. When we look at the equivalent timeline from 2025, the average was 49, median is 28. So again, we have the higher average. That's because of those returning candidates pulling up the average. So we did the same thing that we had done with medical and only looked at the last 2 weeks. And so when we look at the last 2 weeks, and I actually don't have that up. So I can demonstrate how the filter works. On the dashboard, we can just change the dates here. So I'm just going to change it from the 11th to 9/19. And that'll update it and show the average drops closer to the median. So we have an average of 30 over the last 2 weeks and a median of 23 days. Right. And the final step I'm going to show is just from the date the candidates get their result in the field investigation to the date they have their psychological evaluation. So psych is the last step in the hiring process, and it's the only step we don't give candidates at least a 10-day advance notice. That's a courtesy to candidates unless they register for fast track scheduling. But for psychology, typically candidates are contacted by our medical services division and they provide their availability and are scheduled for the next available appointment.
Yeah.
So to still show the comparisons from 2024, July 11th, 2024 to October 3rd, the timeline you can see here in this box towards the right, both the average and the median were 6 days. And the equivalent timeline from this year, it has dropped to 5. So again, like the reading and writing assessment, it's a minor, it's just 1 day, but it adds up throughout the selection process. And those were the main points we wanted to touch on in the dashboard today.
That's great, thank you. I have a question before I turn to my colleague. So we have the test, of course, the test is the point of entry. Medical and poly can kind of go parallel. I know I sound more focused on that than you are. probably am hung up on it for no good reason. But before we get to the site, we do the background. The background actually is a do not pass. Nothing happens during we don't move toward any further action while the background is going on.
Right. Candidates can advance. They can be attending the candidate advancement program, taking PFQs to try to physically prepare for the academy, but there are no other test steps.
There's no other test steps. So I don't see sort of the accounting for the time of the background on this unless I missed it.
Yeah, so it wasn't in the points we focused on, but the dashboard does have that capability.
Okay.
So I go to this. This is the field investigation stage. So I'll just show the same timeline for this calendar year. So I'll just go 7/11, 2025 to this to today. So 10/3, 2025. And oh, I'm sorry. So I filtered by the investigation, or the data was assigned to an investigator. We should actually be filtering based on the date the result was entered. So I'm going to enter those here. So 7/11, 2025 to today. Okay. So here we see the average time from the date that the investigation was assigned to a background investigator to the date they received their result. Average was 113 days, median was 108. I will say when we just filter based on okay cases, that number goes down slightly. It's 98 for both the average and the median. And I'll add to that in context of the Executive Directive 14, personnel and LAPD are continuing to look at ways to cut down that number and make the process more timely.
Okay, so it is the biggest block of time.
Correct.
And I was going to ask, what did the executive directive do? Because all of these changes were made without an executive directive. The executive directive just said, try to go faster?
Correct. So trying to find efficiencies in the process. So we did make some changes, but additional changes are continuing to be looked at with the new division. And Malika, did you want to touch on those changes?
Sure, I can speak to that. That's, I think, some of the crux of the executive directive was establishing benchmarks, establishing a working directive as between the LAPD and personnel. We've often operated under a letter of agreement. We've let that letter of agreement lapse over time, but now what we're working on is establishing protocols between us so that we can make sure that the cases that are assigned, we have sort of like a consistent understanding of how to operate and how to work, as a team. So that's just establishing those benchmarks and protocols as part of the executive directive. One of the most impactful aspects of the directive is the directive to develop a new division within the personnel department dedicated specifically and only to LAPD hiring. And that directive, as I understand it, is related to initial hiring, not necessarily promotions. And so that unit is in the process of being developed.
Okay.
We will need some additional staff, and so you at some point will hear a sort of a request or an interest in that, but that is a process that we are working on developing, and we're working with LAPD to identify how do we streamline some of the processes or rethink the process, because we've implemented a lot of changes that Michael talked about that we're seeing results. He's talking about those changes, especially self-scheduling, but are there other opportunities to improve the candidate experience as they're navigating through the process? That's what we're looking into.
Actually, you want to go ahead? I have a couple more. Why don't you go?
Sorry, Malika, I just found that a little bit comical. I feel that, I don't know that an executive directive necessarily garnered that, because I know that's an ongoing exercise with personnel, but I understand. So I got you. Yeah, anyways, it's an executive directive that could have been an email, I guess. How do we make this a little bit more cohesive? But I know a lot of that work was already ongoing. That being said, I had a question more so about the recruitment, given that there was cuts to, there were cuts in the recruitment efforts. And what does it look like in terms of the diversity of the applicants coming in and the volume of applicants coming in?
That is a number that probably Michael, I think, might be able to pull up within the dashboard. But the personnel department did suffer some substantial cuts
Right.
to our recruitment budget. And essentially, as I understand it, it was functionally eliminated. There was always a circumstance where personnel received recruitment funds and separately LAPD received recruitment funds. And we had a sort of a relationship in that regard. But I think that we're still endeavoring to do what we can, but we don't have a budget to do it. So we're sort of reallocating some of that work toward making the process more efficient.
And we also use like grant funds, to go out there and do recruitment campaigns and leverage our relationships with universities and other entities to try to get into some of these job fairs, because ultimately each one of them requires an entry fee. So we're able to either get in there, I'm serious, they require an entry fee to set up a booth there. So regardless if we're public safety, they still require a fee. So we use a lot of our grant fundings for that. And then most recently, within the last year and a half, there was a substantial grant to hire a marketing firm for the Unrivaled campaign. So that's one of our biggest recruitments that we do through that campaign.
What is your relationship, or how many, and I don't know if like do you source code where the recruitment efforts came from, or where these candidates were derived from? And have our work source centers been part of perhaps garnering some of those candidates? And I ask because, for example, we've co-located in my district with EWDD a one-stop shop for hiring with veteran services, with the community college district and economic workforce development. Has there been an active, do you kind of source, if you will, where some of these recruits have actually been derived from?
We have in the past personnel when they managed recruitment. I do believe there were relationship with the work source centers, and even in feeder classes like associate community officer, we partnered with workforce development to try to attract candidates. This fiscal year, personnel does not have any funding for recruitment. So I don't know if LAPD has any thoughts on their recruitment efforts.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But the work source centers, this is what they do. So this is, again, I'm not going to do it by motion, and I'm not going to ask for an executive directive. This is just sensible ways of sourcing recruits. But we have other appendages that reach out into the community that have an ability to connect you with some of these things that isn't going to cost you any money for recruitment, because we're already on a community college campus, for example, in my district. So I would highly encourage both personnel and the police department to talk to the work source centers or the economic workforce development department to figure out how you're going to help make sure that that's an opportunity, because it's co-located with veteran services and all the variety of programs that we're offering. And we've done that one-stop shop in my district, and you're talking about the very demographics of people that we're trying to attract. So again, let's not wait to be told what to do. Let's see the opportunity and seize it. So I'd like to see that. I'd like to see that happen. And then also, just with respect to the dashboard, and I saw that it now includes the airport police and the port police on that. And I presume, is it because the park rangers are part of LAPD's, they're just conflated in that number, or are they going to be identified or tracked separately?
They're tracked separately. So I think this is primarily because airport, port, and LAPD are tracked within the same application processing system, and park rangers in the government jobs application processing system.
But park rangers are going through procedurally the same, I mean, they go through the academy and they go through the same system, so why?
And I think that's something the new division is looking at as well, to see if it makes sense to have peace officer application processing in separate systems.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Are there any policy changes for how we use the polygraph? I know that we had talked, there was some discussion months ago about how the poly can be time consuming because folks will take it and then take it and then take it and then take it. And there was some discussion, and I'm not taking a knowledgeable position on this, but there was some discussion of using the poly as informational but not as dispositive of whether someone moves forward. What are we doing with poly?
No changes have been implemented at the time, but that is one of the things that will be reviewed by the new division, and they'll have recommendations.
Basically, the same thing. Right now, we're avoiding, and I don't know if they're here, correct me if I'm wrong. We're avoiding making changes until we've made sure that we're taking in consideration all of the pieces. We're working very closely with LAPD about whether or not that can or should be a disqualifying factor, whether it's really part of it is the use of countermeasures,
right,
is a disqualifying factor. But we're also looking at what does the psychology team looks into, things like that. So it's how countermeasures could or should impact the application. And so I know there's been some interest in looking at changing how polygraph is used. I believe that we use it relatively consistently with other jurisdictions. So it's not that different. But I believe it's most jurisdictions use a polygraph as part of their process. But whether or not we use it to disqualify people or if we use it as advisory, that's something that is an ongoing discussion.
Okay. Anything to add to that?
Just to add to that, as we meet regularly once a week, twice a week with personnel department. We're co-located within their building. And as a result, from Executive Director 14, that this discussion has come up regarding the polygraph there, the countermeasures, and even oftentimes when we do the BARP, the appeals on countermeasures, we give the candidate the third opportunity. But again, when we're talking about reducing the time frame to hiring to 180 days, is that being counterproductive? But all of those discussions, along with other system improvements, are underway and in discussion with the city attorney to implement and update the bulletin. And then eventually we are going to have two concurrent processes going, those that apply with the old bulletin and those that apply with the new bulletin. But all those changes are pending and soon to be rolled out here eventually.
And thank you for that. I appreciate that it needs to be done carefully. And I had not heard any information. I'd be interested in hearing more information on what other jurisdictions do. Because I've heard both that we are an outlier and that we are in the majority. So they both can't be true.
We'll look into that.
But that's what anecdotal analysis does. It just makes stuff up sometimes. What about on the background checks? Are we looking at where that's resourced and whether that whether it needs additional resources and what level of expertise, whether we need sworn folks doing it, non-sworn folks doing it, retired folks doing it? Are we looking at that? Because background is still one of the big chunks, and it's the one area where if you sped it up, you're not going to change the result. I mean, I worry about speeding up a background or speeding up a psych, but it's one area where there's discrete information, you go get it, and how do you resource that?
I'd say the structure, the time frame, the protocols related to the field investigation, the background investigation is where our relationship and our discussions have spent most of its time. How do we make that process as efficient as possible? We're very concerned about losing candidates through that process. To other jurisdictions, it's a major concern for the personnel department and for LAPD. So as we're this opportunity to sort of rethink how we're doing hiring and focus on the biggest piece, which is the focus on LAPD, has given us the opportunity to say, okay, what resources do we need to really think through and assess, based on facts, best practices through this process. We will need additional resources to do that. Right now, we have background investigators and we have background investigator supervisors and we have reviewers and things. What we don't have is the team of people who really can say, I'm going to pull myself away from the rigorous pace of getting through these backgrounds and reviewing through these backgrounds to think about the bigger picture, to think about other jurisdictions, to work with, other departments to make this process more efficient. And that's something that we're currently in discussions with the CAO, and you will hear from us at some point with respect to that too.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, can I also jump in? There is another council file that we are working with the Personnel Department and LAPD on those who are disqualified and the demographics. It was your motion, and then recommendations to the process as well. So that should be coming in the next few months. So we're partnering on that.
And also there's another, I think that there's a major report back that the Personnel Department is working on that was asked for many months ago, which is sort of a big picture about LAPD hiring or police hiring, public safety hiring, and those processes. And those reports are underway, and I anticipate that they will come sooner rather than later. But that's something that we're very closely working on.
Good. Yes.
And you indicate, when is that, when is my motion, or that was my motion, right?
That, I think you approved that, the council approved that in June, so we've been
Okay.
working on that. So there's nothing you need to do right now, it's the report that
It's
comes
coming
forward.
back, right, okay.
Thank you for all this work. The dashboard is impressive, and it's the most important thing is to document, and I appreciate it very much. I look forward to council members' motion coming back as well. If there's nothing else, I'm going to recommend that we, or move that we continue and hold this matter in Personnel Committee. No vote needed. I learned slow, but I did learn that today. Anything else?
That clears the desk.
We are adjourned. Thank you so much, everybody.